My name is Doug Kaufmann. For the past 40 years, I've dedicated my life and even my career to finding the root cause of disease. Join me in a team of physicians, pharmacists, and scientists, and soon you too will know the cause. I promised we'd have another great show today, and I'm going to keep that promise. 3 things I want to teach you today. What is it with indoor mold? I mean, all of a sudden in America, insurance companies said, nope, mold isn't a problem anymore, but it is. How could they do that? Why would they do that? And what do we do to get around that, right? Because it is a problem. Inhaling it long term really is a problem. Then we're going to talk about something called probiotics, okay? You've heard it for the past 20, 22 years. You didn't know it was yogurt, 100 years ago, or aged milk, but we call it probiotics today. And finally today, we're going to talk about something that affects millions of mostly women in America. And I wonder if worldwide it does also. It's mobile pain. Ouch, now it hurts on my left side. Ow, now it hurts my right hip. We call it fibromyalgia. All 3 of those things we're going to discuss today. And let's start with kind of a controversial topic called indoor mold. Does it exist? Folks, anytime you have water and an enclosed environment, you can expose yourself to toxins called mold. As we've discussed yesterday, it's not so much the mold as the poison the mold makes in that house. We call these molds mycotoxins. Myco means fungus. So mycology is the study of fungus. And a mycotoxicosis is what I think so many people worldwide suffer from. And their doctors currently would disagree with me, many of them, but I think eventually this word will proven to be true. I think that sometimes cancers are chronic mycotoxicoses, sometimes diabetes, sometimes autoimmune diseases, arthritis, etc., are chronic mycotoxicoses. Well, I got a fascinating inquiry on Facebook. I do a couple hours of live Facebook, YouTube, social media per week. I try and keep up enabling the audiences to contact me and try and answer their questions. This is the question that I got. Here's a difficult question. I always love it when they start like that, from Jose. How do we make local governments aware of the dangers of the inside mold-infested buildings, rental properties, and schools? And I dwelled on that. I probably look at 100 questions a day. And this one caught me, and I think it caught me because it started with, here's a difficult question, and then a controversy. Doug, if my kids are going to a school that's moldy, could that injure their health? Most medical professionals would say, oh no, allergy, might cause a sniffly. We've gone deeper than that, folks. That was a good answer in 1972. Today we know that mold, not every child sitting in that schoolhouse is going to be affected the same. And today we understand that the more vigor the immune system has, the stronger the immune system, the less vulnerable you are to those things. A 7, 10-year-old child has a huge immune system, right? Whereas a guy my age, 70 years old, his immunity is beginning to dip. So we need to watch our mold exposure more than maybe a 7-year-old child. My concern is if that child is spending, let's see, 6 hours a day times 5 days a week, 30 hours a week exposed to the mold, does it go further than a little sniffle, a little itchy throat? Is that child now getting chronically sick? And worse, what makes Brad rise? Is that child, by the time they're 27 years old, are you going to be seeing obesity set in that child from the yeast or the mold that they have inhaled back 20 years ago in elementary school? So let's go to indoor molds. There are several. I've spoken with you about these. You're becoming well educated in this. Aspergillus, Penicillium, Stachybotrys, and a host of other toxic molds can grow in buildings that have experienced water leaks. Many studies document the danger associated with living in these buildings. Insurance companies no longer offer mold remediation coverage on standard policies, but many say that it can be added at additional cost. I've walked you through the forest of Aspergillus. I've walked you through the forest of Penicillium and penicillin. There are now 100 plus, maybe 200 penicillin-derived antibiotics on the market. We haven't talked much about Stachybotrys. Again, there are several subcategories of Stachybotrys. Let's study this a little right now, knowing, do you ever see, you look up at your ducting in your kitchen or your bathroom, and there are filaments, like black filaments. You know, you got the heat or the air conditioning on, and they're kind of blowing out. Some of that is Stachybotrys mold. And it's not good, folks. And most people think, well, I'll just get up there with a rag, wipe that stuff off. It's not that stuff. It's what's growing throughout the HVAC ducting, the metal ducting, that you should be concerned about. And then the question is, should I have a remediator go in and shove some rags in there, move them around, you know, they got their mask on and pull it out. Have I not just liberated all this mold throughout my ducting system? You know, have I awoken a sleeping giant in my ducting system? Okay, let's talk Stachybotrys a little bit, or Stachybotrys as my doctor friends say. It's a black fungus, a black mold, which grows on wet areas containing cellulose. Wood, paper, carpet, even drywall has cellulose in it. Stachybotrys contains several very toxic mycotoxins, such as the trichothecenes, which damage the immune and nervous systems, and hemolysin, which causes bleeding. Isn't that fascinating? This is Dr. Luke Curtis. Luke is a certified industrial hygienist, one of 11 doctors in America, who's both a CIH, certified industrial hygienist, and a medical doctor. He and I worked together for 20 years. Very, very bright man. He began publishing a long time ago that indoor buildings where people gather could be toxic if the perfect storm rolls in. You're older, you're in that building a lot of time, you have an immune system that's already compromised, maybe with arthritis, maybe with a stomach problem. We call it the perfect storm, Dr. Curtis and I do. Let's study this a little more further. I'll never forget this in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. This was 2001, so it was 18 years ago. Students and staff at the Central Middle School in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, reported symptoms similar to those associated with what we call the sick building syndrome. The inhabitants were sick. Investigators noted that the black fungal growth occurred throughout the building on wet cellulose ceiling tiles. And just stay here with me. Fungal growth of this type is consistent with the genus Stachybotrys, the genus being the type of fungus. Stachybotrys spores may contain macrolytic trichothecenes, which may cause harm when inhaled or ingested. Folks, there was what Dr. Curtis is referencing here was some Chicago, in the U.S. here, some Chicago children, small children, were sleeping near a heater vent that was loaded with Stachybotrys and experienced bleeding, nose bleeding, gum bleeding, all sorts of bleeding. If you have nosebleeds of unknown origin, please talk to the ear, nose, and throat doctor about fungus. He's not going to know. He hasn't been in your home. But those two are very, very commonly put together. Nosebleeds of unknown origin and inhaling mold. This stuff, I think, can widen the gaps in the little capillaries that run up. You have a huge artery running here behind the nose. It's called the sphenopalatine artery. And if that artery is impregnated with mold, the gap can widen, and all of a sudden you have nose bleeding. You have to do your part. Basically, it boils down to this. If you're a landlord or a building owner, take care of maintenance required to keep the mold-free environment for your tenants. That's just good. Do that in good spirit. If you rent, add a clause in your agreement that deals with buildings, leaks, or molds. Take a scientific paper off pubmed.org. to prove your concern. Listen, I got a real concern. I'm living in a moldy place. If the owner says no, I'd say goodbye. No shortage of apartments where owners will take good care of the property and assure that you're not inhaling mold. Now, when we get back, what's a probiotic? I know what an antibiotic is. I'll explain the difference.
After having read the fungus link in the diabetes book, it's eye-opening. It's allowed me to, I guess, feel the joy and the happiness to practice again. A lot of times with my patients, they come into my office and they have questions in regards to various things, and I don't have good answers for them. They've tried various medications, they've tried antibiotics and other things. And honestly, it's very, very difficult to look people in the eye and tell them, I just don't know. I just don't know how I can help you any further. After having read these books and after having spoken with Doug, I feel like there's hope again. I feel like, you know, maybe there's a way for me to now help people that before would have been, you know, basically hopeless. I have to prescribe the medications, the antifungals, the diflucan, the nystatin, and get them on these diets because it only makes sense. It's logical to me at this point. I feel like if I were to withhold that information from those people, I would not be, you know, upholding my oath that I've taken to help other people. And that's something that I've dedicated my life to. If you came to me now, it'd be, you know, I think diet absolutely is crucial. This is good science, and Doug has shown that.
And welcome back, friends. So we've covered indoor mold. It's a bit controversial, but if you're chronically sick, go back to when it started. I always will teach you this. You know what? Doug's right. I've had this cough. I've had this vision problem or these migraine headaches or this COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, since we moved into that house. We knew it was a 60-year-old house. We love antiques. Could that house be causing these problems? Here in the U.S., we can go to Home Depot or Lowe's or any of these big industrial places, and for $20, we can get a Petri dish with instructions how to put it in your bedroom. You spend a third of your life in there and see if indeed you're growing a fuzzy mold out in that area. Next question is it a pathogenic mold? Can it cause disease? Send it off to a laboratory in your neighborhood or in your area, the biggest town near you, and they can analyze it for you. Next thing we're going to discuss is something called probiotics, okay? I got this question from Tia. I heard you talk about taking a good probiotic every day. Is it okay to take more daily if I'm coming down with something? Good question. Good question. Let's begin here. Did you ever have biology in school? Remember the first day of school, the teacher taught us what bio means. Life. Who invented that word, anti-bio? Anti-life. Antibiotic. And of course, folks, what they're referring to is something that would kill dangerous pathogenic life, and that's an antibiotic. Along comes, years later, an organization that says, what about probiotics? You see, antibiotics are indiscriminate bacteria killers. We didn't know 50 years ago that we got a couple pounds of good bacteria in our intestines. Little did we know that 70% of our whole immune system is it made by that bacteria. What did we do starting in 1942? We swallowed pills that killed the good stuff. Yeast could be allowed to grow freely without a competing food source. So when the bacteria goes, the yeast is still there. Now we're beginning to understand these antibiotics and other mycotoxins can activate those yeast, turn them from harmless yeast that God put there, Candida species and others, into harmful yeast that are capable of poking a hole through the lumen, the lining of the intestine. Okay, so what are probiotics? First, let's explain them. Probiotics are microorganisms like Lactobacillus acidophilus, it's a bacteria, that when consumed as in food or dietary supplements, maintains or restores beneficial bacteria to the digestive tract. That is right out of the dictionary. Along comes brilliant people many years ago that said, wow, if it kills bacteria, antibiotics, the good guys, thank God it kills the bad guys, don't we need to restore those that God put there in our intestine? What are they? So they began looking at them. Lactobacillus acidophilus, good strains of bacteria. Boy, folks, prebiotics, postbiotics, and probiotics. You can study them all. Very, very good things to put back in. You take the average person who's been on antibiotics since the time they were 3 months old to the time they're 10 years old, they're not going to have much good bacteria left in the belly. You start them on a good probiotic. You can, if they're in the refrigerated section, that means they have a milk base, right? If they're not in the refrigerated section, that means they don't have a milk base. Just as good, just don't have a milk base that you need to put in the refrigerator. These are essential good bacteria that we need. So many, I would guess 100,000 studies in the last 20 years from credible scientists have said probiotics are really, really important. Who needs a probiotic? I think there are three basic groups. People who take or have taken antibiotics need probiotics, and that could have been 40 years ago, and now you're constipated for 40 years. Try probiotics. These are indiscriminate bacteria killers. As you've learned, they kill the good and the bad bacteria. A large percentage of our immune system has to do with bacteria in our intestines. Antibiotics erase them, and yeast within the gut can become disease-causing. So first group of people I think that would benefit from probiotics are people who have ever, not today, not last week, not last flu, ever, as a little girl or a little boy, were you on lots of antibiotics. No harm, no foul. If today the bowel's working, right? No bloating, belching, gas, constipation, diarrhea, GERD, like everybody seems to have in America. None of that. Okay, you got away with the antibiotics you took when you were a child. If you have any tummy problems now, cramping, serious disease, Crohn's, etc., ulcerative colitis, think of putting the good bacteria in there. Okay, so that's the first. Who's the second group of people that might benefit? People who have various intestinal or stomach symptoms and or diseases. In 2016, fungus was found to contribute to Crohn's disease, which affects millions of people worldwide. This was my friend Dr. Ganoum. Dr. Ganoum and I have known each other for several years. When I learned he was a mycologist and had published hundreds of papers, not on bacteria, but on fungus, he and I became instant friends. He and his son and I have met here in Dallas. Wonderful, wonderful family. Dr. Ganoum wrote a paper, and in it, he said, we have found in Crohn's tissue, not only bacteria, because every doctor uses antibiotics for Crohn's, but we have found a lot of fungus in that also. So maybe we should start treating Crohn's with antifungals instead of antibiotics. And I put this graphic together just for that. People with inflammatory condition, Crohn's disease, may have a higher level of certain fungus in their gut. That's what his study said. Scientists have known that gut bacteria may contribute to the development of Crohn's, but the new study finds that this fungus may also play a role, finds fungi of various sorts may play a role in this condition, and probiotics most likely will help. Folks, if I had a gut disease, I'd go to the doctor and I'd say, can I have nystatin? Nystatin just kills yeast down in the belly. It has both fungicidal, to kill, and fungistatin, to stop, properties. Then I'd say I'm going to change my diet and follow Kaufmann's diet. So I'm going to stop feeding these yeast. And third, I'm going to start taking a good probiotic. Okay? Finally, anyone wishing to improve their immune system can benefit from probiotics. Dr. Joe Mercola, a friend of mine, nearly 100 trillion bacteria, fungi, and viruses and other microorganisms comprise your gut microbiome. And advancing science has made it quite clear that these organisms play a major role in your health. So says Dr. Mercola, both mental and physical. Your body is in fact composed of more bacteria and other organisms than actual cells. When he told me that many years ago, I did one of those, you know how you step back and go, wow. I had this, you got to be kidding, more cells. God didn't put bacteria there for an inconsequential reason. That bacteria makes your immune system. We began erasing it in 1942 with penicillin. Folks, that was advanced science back then. I think that's a good thing. Many people are alive today because of antibiotics, but I think antibiotics have come back to snap some of us. So when you take an antibiotic, always ask your doctor if you can chase it, maybe at night before you go to bed, maybe after you're done with your round of antibiotics, if you can begin taking for a month or so a good probiotic. I think it's very, very important. Now, millions of people worldwide, this wasn't true 30 years ago or 40 years ago, it is now, millions of people suffer from a brand new disease we call fibromyalgia. Let's define it and then study it a little bit when we get back.
Okay, I talk about detoxification all the time on this show, and please, always work with a practitioner, a qualified licensed practitioner before you detox. But here are 3 strategies for detox that I love, and there's a million more. But number 1, gentle fasting. It might be a few hours, it might be a day, it might be a few days. Make sure and get plenty of water if you're fasting, but this just helps give the whole body a break. Work with your doctor, and if you're taking medication, don't do this at all. Number 2, chlorophyll. Whether it's in the form of fresh juices that you're juicing yourself with spinach, kale, etc., or a chlorophyll supplement, this is a great anti-mycotic. And number 3, zeolite. Zeolite is a volcanic ash that actually helps to fight off mycotoxins and heavy metals. These are 3 great ones to get you going.
Chia seeds were once referred to as Indian running food due to their incredible energizing powers. Chia has a high amount of tryptophan, so it can improve serotonin levels. Think happy, happy. Chia seeds also help with insulin sensitivity and diabetes by balancing your blood sugar.
It must have been 1988 or 89. I was working at one of the big hospitals here in Dallas, Texas, with a few doctors. And we were helping people with psoriasis and skin problems, eczema, by putting them on an antifungal program, brand new to science at that time. Then one day, a young woman came in and she was in the waiting room crying. She saw the doctors, and then Dr. Weekly brought her into my office and said, I don't know if you can help her. She has a condition called fibromyalgia. First of all, what is fibromyalgia? Second of all, should we use the same antifungals in the Kaufmann diet to see if she could get relief? This isn't a skin problem. This is muscle fibers that hurt. Let's first define it. Folks, little did I know, she worked at the medical school in Fort Worth. A couple of months into working with her with antifungal medicines the doctor gave her and the Kaufmann diet, her fibromyalgia was 80% cleared. So there is a fungal component to fibromyalgia. She invited me to the medical school to speak with doctors twice. And many doctors first became aware of fungus contributing to a disease of unknown etiology back 40 years ago. It's called fibromyalgia, okay? I have fibromyalgia, says Suzanne. This was a question on Facebook. Can anything be done to relieve this pain? Well, that's what this young woman asked me a long time ago. Thank God. I realize, you know, that God had me meet her for a reason. Now I'm able to help people with fibromyalgia, which I didn't even know what it was. First, let's define it. Fibro means fiber. My, or myo, means muscle. And algia means pain. So fibromyalgia is muscle fiber pain. And folks, it tends to move around on people. And I think I know why. Sometimes people get up out of bed and, oh, I wish I didn't have this fibromyalgia. My left shoulder hurts so much. Well, they laid on the left side that night. The next night, oh, my tailbone and my neck, they laid on their back that night. Fungus tends to gravitate to where heat is. You and that mattress create a lot of heat. And so I think that might be why, and then their diets keep it going and so forth. So fibromyalgia, according to the Mayo Clinic, doctors don't know what causes fibromyalgia, but they say it most likely involves a variety of factors working together as your DNA, genetics, infection. Boy, they have hit that right on. But to a doctor, infection means bacteria. To me, an infection means fungus. And then physical and or emotional trauma. I agree with every one of those. I think in rare instances, if mom or grandma had fibromyalgia, you may have it also. Don't ever forget that fungus make poisons called mycotoxins that are what? Neurotoxic. If they're in your bloodstream, they're hurting your nerves. Okay? Next graphic, it affects over 5 million people just here in America, 80% of whom are females. Most autoimmune disease are suffered by females. The defining symptoms of fibromyalgia are chronic widespread pain, fatigue, heightened pain in response to tactile or touching sensation. Other symptoms include irritable bowel syndrome, stomach problems, nausea, headaches, numbness, tingling, memory problems, heart palpitations, and dizziness. Do you see how that opens? Other symptoms include IBS, tummy problems, nausea, Folks, this is probably a disseminating gut disease. Lots of antibiotics, too much alcohol in your past, lots of peanuts and corn with mycotoxins in them. Anytime I see any disease that has associated stomach problems, I think, okay, that's where it started. And then it just disseminates from there. So says Wikipedia. So the heart palpitations, dizziness, this is a systemic disorder, not a local disorder, okay? Here's the fungus link to fibromyalgia. Many molds and fungi can cause swelling and therefore pain. Remember again that some of these mycotoxins are neurotoxic. A records audit of patients' progress notes found that 21% of mold patients, 11% of chemically sensitive patients, and 4% of regular patients who had been diagnosed with fibromyalgia show significant association between fibromyalgia and mold exposure. Well, what Dr. Gray found there was there's a commonality that exists between a condition called fibromyalgia and fungus. How are we exposed? Remember yesterday we went over this. Sometimes the air, sometimes the medications, some of these drugs, folks, cyclosporin, the tissue rejection drug. When you have a kidney transplant, you take cyclosporin to lower your immunity to accept the kidney of the individual who gave it to you. Cyclosporin is a mycotoxin, and it's meant to lower your immune system. So when your immune system's low, you become more vulnerable to these things like fibromyalgia. Well, Doug, my immune system isn't low. If you're living in a moldy environment, or eating lots of corn every day, or eating lots of peanut or wheat or sugar every day, fungi themselves lower your immunity and can lead to an immunocompromised state. Here's something I used to ask the doctor's patients when they came in. Okay, so you have fibromyalgia. Have you taken many rounds of antibiotics? Are you craving pasta, bread, sugar, or alcohol? You'd be shocked at that answer. Do you have chronic sinus infections, which, by the way, since 1999, we've known are fungus? Do you have breathing problems like chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, coughing, lung problems? This kind of gives us a hint that there's something in your indoor environment. Does heat worsen the symptom? I cannot tell you how many people tell me their fibromyalgia wasn't bad till they got out of the shower or the bath. Then, oh, fungus loves heat. Give it what it wants. It desires carbohydrates, sugar. Give it heat, sugar, keep it happy, and it's going to disseminate through your body. Do you have nail fungus? We call this onychomycosis, or seborrheic dermatitis, which is dandruff. Do you have stomach problems? Isn't it interesting how stomach problems probably begin the course of a disease called fibromyalgia? Mayo Clinic's right, we don't know what causes it. But in some cases, what have we got to lose by asking the doctor for antifungal medicines and following the Kaufmann diet? Hope you learned today. I always learn when I'm with you. Thank you for being in my life, and the TV show continues thanks to you. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.